come now to questions for oral answer. Question number 1, in the name of James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and reads, will he be formally raising the issue of New Zealanders detained in Australia when he meets with Malcolm Turnbull later this week?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
When he meets with Malcolm Turnbull, will he be requesting that Australia bring back to the mainland those New Zealanders being detained in offshore detention centres?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I will be raising the issue of New Zealanders being sent to detention centres, in particular the offshore processing centre of Christmas Island.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
At the meeting, will the Prime Minister be requesting that Australia increase the imprisonment threshold for deportation of New Zealanders?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, well, obviously we'll have a wide-ranging discussion, but what is causing the problems are the changes that were made by the Australian Parliament late last year to effectively lower the mandatory cancellation of visas threshold, and on that basis, yes, we will be discussing that issue.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this meeting, will the Prime Minister be requesting that Australia do a case-by-case analysis for New Zealanders on humanitarian grounds prior to deportation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't be sure that that will be one particular issue that will be raised.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that he is now criticising the use of offshore detention centres for New Zealanders, why did he negotiate a deal with Australia that would have seen the use of these very centres for refugees seeking asylum in New Zealand?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no one likes to see detention centres really full stop, but the main purpose, of course, was to try and take those people out of the refugee detention centres. That's why we were agreeing to take 150.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Is he aware of information that another 40 to 50 New Zealanders are due to be shipped to Christmas Island in the next fortnight? And if so, will he be asking Malcolm Turnbull to stop this?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, I don't have those specifics.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Given that he knew about the plight of New Zealanders being detained in Australia, why didn't he raise the issue with Tony Abbott at their last meeting in Papua New Guinea? And why was the Memorandum of Understanding only progressed following a massive public outcry?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's actually not true. I raised the issue actually, in fact, first with Tony Abbott, the bilateral talks I held with him in February of this year. And again, when we met in Wellington in April, the issue I also raised with the Australian Foreign Minister in New York. The Foreign Minister of New Zealand has raised the issue on numerous occasions, and officials have raised it. So this issue has been raised for some time. But in the end, the rules that the Australian government set are the rules that the Australian government set. And I can't necessarily demand change any more than Helen Clark could when she agreed back in 2001 to allow a position where New Zealanders had less rights in Australia in certain circumstances than others. That was the situation Helen Clark accepted.
Question number 2.